speaking of the shooting war, I'm not very confident about the state of that either. Like, the U.S. military has spent billions on failed projects like the literal combat ships. Meanwhile, we have a huge ammo shortage. We've shipped a bunch of Stinger missiles to Ukraine, and now we don't have any ourselves. So even if it came to a shooting war, we don't have enough ammo. There was a statistic that we reported that it was like in a week, all of our artillery would be gone in a war in Taiwan.
Well, we've got a Marine Corps, so we're okay. But okay, that said, that advertisement out of the way.
Maybe we can buy some weapons from China.
We have in the past, but that's another story. But the point is, we are buy things that we use for weapons. The magnets that go into some of our hardware, some of the raw materials that you use for explosives, etc. And there are, chips that show up in our aircraft and other materials. So we've created a certain dependency on them.
Is it not illegal to have things like that in American weapon systems?
I think it is it is, but it's also really stupid. And we've been doing that for a long time. But we're probably so.
I gotta say, now I'm reminded of Battlestar Galactica. Anyways, carry on.
It's such an uplifting topic to think. I mean, you think about this stuff, but it shows you just how, and once again, a very successful Chinese psychological operation. For so long, you could not even say China was a potential enemy.
Yeah.
We spent 20 years in the so-called sandbox, Afghanistan and Iraq, and focused on that sort of war. And during that time, you could not say, and no one, that China might be coming down the road and, be angry and looking to cause us harm. And if you did say it, you would be at best ridiculed. At worst, you would be punished and cashiered.
Well, we need China's help in the war on terrorism.
Oh, absolutely. And transnational crime, and, which they're behind a lot of it. But the idea was that you just couldn't say it. And it just sounds amazing if that was the U.S. military.
Where did that come from, though? The idea that you couldn't say it.
I don't know where it originated, but I think it did. It sort of emerged from this whole of government belief that with some understanding, China would come around. You just have to understand them, understand their fears, and accommodate them. You remember when just trying to. People argue when it started, but certainly I'd probably start looking at something Henry Kissinger did. That's where most of the wonderful things that happened track back to. But there was a professor, an Ivy League professor, who was appointed as an assistant secretary, I think, of defense. And it was the 90s. And he said, well, we decided that if you wanted to make China an enemy, just treat them like one. And implicitly, if you didn't want China to be an enemy, don't treat them like one. So accommodate them. Be nice to them. Give them what they want. And that was Professor Joe Nye. And I think that really did typify the thinking in the elite classes, policy classes, political classes.
These were people who were never bullied in school, I guess?
Apparently not. And then
the thinking.
I don't know.
There's part of the thinking that makes sense, because if you treat China like an enemy, they will be an enemy. But the reverse of that is not necessarily true, because regardless of how we treat China, they have been considering the U.S. an enemy since 1949. So it kind of doesn't matter, right?
It does help what the other guy actually thinks. You're right. Mao Zedong, talked about America as the enemy, doing something about it. And also after Tiananmen Square, the marching orders went out to the PLA to be able to defeat an enemy that has aircraft carriers, which was us. And that was 1989, 1990. So that was a long time ago. And it should have been very clear to anyone, I'd say by the late 90s, what China had in mind. But in the military's sort of approach to all of this, my sense was it did reflect the thinking from DC. But also there was a sense of condescension and sort of dismissiveness towards the Chinese, as if they would never be our equals. And you see this you'd see this throughout in a lot of our, not just military, but business treatment of China. There was a CEO of one of the Hughes Group companies in the early 90s. He said, well, I don't mind giving the Chinese giving them technology because we will always be ahead of them. And man, how wrong can you be? These are
the Chinese communists consider America the same way. Like Americans will never be as clever as the Chinese, right?
Sometimes you have to almost say, yeah. One hesitates to go to one extreme, but they must be just baffled at our naivetés. This makes Charlie Brown and Lucy kicking that football. This is what the Chinese are doing to us makes Charlie Brown, Lucy look like child's play by comparison.
Well, I mean, it is literally child's play.
Yeah.
Well, I think back to the Scarborough Shoal incident, and I think that was like a case of like where we surprised the Chinese Communist Party, where they were trying to aggressively take over the Scarborough Shoal. The United States, ordered or negotiated a treaty, not actually a treaty, but negotiated so, both sides would lead the Philippine and the Chinese side. And the Chinese side just ignored it and stayed, and the U.S. didn't do anything. And I think that was a moment where they were like, really? America's not going to do anything? And then you see the ramp up in the South China Sea, the building in the artificial islands, militarizing them after they said they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think we surprised them.
Oh, I think we repeatedly do. I think they hurt themselves from sort of pinching themselves just to keep from laughing so often. You tell President Obama, I'm not going to militarize these islands. And, well, he didn't know what I meant by militarize, and we go for it. It really is just almost baffling just how we've done. It's sometimes it goes beyond. There's of course naivete, condescension, the smell of money, which we'll get. I used to work with a Wall Street firm, so I know something of it. And if you just put money in front of like a certain type of Westerner, that they perform like a sea lion at SeaWorld. He thinks he's going to get a mackerel snack. And they never think they have enough. You kind of go nuts. And you just never have enough. And the Chinese play to that so well. And they've sometimes you have to step back and you've got to hand it to them. So you almost don't know what to say.
Except we should triple our investments in China, says
BlackRock.
Yep.
It's and the way that works is I think it's not well understood.
I'm just imagining Larry Fink, but like as a sea lion. He's like,
but he's actually full of mackerel. but he's
full of something.
He's got some other guys who are lined up to give him more. But the thing is, they're not investing their money; it's somebody else's money, and you get a cut of the sort of the trade when it starts, and then when it ends, you get a cut of that too.
Right, like they basically get a percentage, essentially. And so, it's a brilliant business model, actually, because because a lot of these, it doesn't really matter whether, like, if I put my money in BlackRock, then like I could make money or I could lose money. But either way, BlackRock makes money. Mm-hmm. So if I make money, they make more money. If I lose money, they only make a little bit of money. But either way, they win to some degree, right?
Yeah, I think
it's brilliant. I think as a business model,
I think it's called a racket. But
I was going to say like that maybe is a great way that we can make money.
Who's we?
Us on China Uncensored. We just give in to the Chinese Communist Party.
Uh huh.
Mm-hmm. What's step 2?
Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yeah.
Step 3 is profit.
Okay.
That is basically America's business model with China.
Yeah. Actually, step 2 is surrender our values.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's been successful.
Very successful.
Oh, so anyway, something I want to talk about is what would a Chinese invasion of Taiwan look like? Because in your book, you laid out a really scary idea that like all it would take is the U.S. to dilly-dally for like 3 days, and Taiwan would be lost. And I can easily imagine it taking more than 3 days for the U.S. government to decide, should we actually commit troops?
well, we can't decide to ban TikTok. That's the scenario that I could easily see happening, is the Chinese looking at Ukraine, looking at all the problems Putin had when he invaded, and saying, well, these are just the Russians. We're better than them. And I think they will think that they will learn the lessons and not make those mistakes. So the idea is to hit Taiwan really hard, really fast with everything you have and cut it off entirely, electronically, the internet, physically isolate it. And at the same time, tell the Americans, look, this is a domestic matter. You stand clear or it's nuclear war. And depending on who's in the White House, you may get a different response. And if the Chinese smell weakness or indecision, well, they're going to like their odds even more if they go after Taiwan. And one could imagine an American administration saying, look, we don't, it's unfortunate, it's too bad what's going to have happened to these Taiwanese people, but there's just nothing we can do. And we can't afford risk of nuclear war, World War III over a little island 90 miles from Taiwan. Just let it go. And they're going to be egged on by Wall Street, a lot of the business class, probably calling up the White House, every 15 seconds, saying, we can't have war, don't start a war with China, don't provoke them. We want to get back to business as usual. And at that point, well, you can kind of see all the hand wringing and the tut-tutting. So that's a scenario. And
so essentially that if China, the CCP used overwhelming force all at once, then like if the U.S. just delays a little bit, then it's already too late to respond in a military way anyway, right?
Well, you have to go pretty fast. The response has to be quick. And remember, though, if you've got your fishing fleet and your maritime militia has, say, laid mines in the Japanese ports, you've got anti-ship missiles being fired from cargo ship containers with U.S. Navy coming out of San Diego, well, you improved your odds. And it makes it harder for the Americans to get in. But a lot does depend on what the White House decides to do. But delay is fatal. But once again, there are options, and we often talk just about a fight if it's limited to Taiwan, sort of like a football field. It's 100 yards by 40 yards, and that's it. But if you spread the battlefield and you're willing to take those risks, you can cause China no end of trouble. And for example, they don't import anywhere near enough food, not nearly enough energy. They're absolutely dependent on export earnings. If you can cut off their trade, cut off their food supplies, their energy, and Xi Jinping he's implied that he's really scared about this. Partly he told Mr. Biden a couple meetings ago, we don't use trade as a weapon. Well, if China says you shouldn't do something, you should probably do a whole lot more of it. But also the Americans, we do have a good hand to play. Our military is still pretty darn powerful. And we could cause China a lot of problems, even if you just kept the fight fairly close to Taiwan. But as Chris noted earlier, we have got to start building a whole lot more long-range missiles. And how many do we need? The answer is really one more. You never have enough of them. But we do have a military hand to play. Our submarines are still pretty good, something of an ace in the hole. But it would not be a Thursday to Friday fight if a war over Taiwan did break out. And even if I hope it doesn't happen, but if Americans somehow decides to just let Taiwan go, though I really hope that doesn't happen. It would be criminal, be akin to what happened to the Czechs in 1939. 38-39 with all the just wonderful results of that. If that happens, the world will never be the same. We've sort of gotten used to it in our lifetimes, but it will not be the same place.